Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I hope you all had a chance to explore a bit, maybe get a little lost. That's part of the fun here. Some of you have been here before and know that getting lost is practically a requirement. And for those of you who are new, we hope you have a chance to at some point if you haven't already. With so many secret doors and exhibits, this place was built to spark curiosity, discovery, and connection. The kind of creative spirit celebrated by Heaven's Door Whiskey. I'm Z Stein, and on behalf of my mother, H, over there, and everyone at the Old Museum in the Mansion, I would like to thank you for being here and for supporting us. I actually grew up in the building. For me, it wasn't just a nonprofit, a hotel, or a museum, it was a home. And it was an incredible childhood. I slept in a different room every night. I'd literally go to bed in one room, wake up in the middle of the night, and decide I didn't want to stay there anymore, and just move to another one, which was really scary for my mom because she would wake up in the morning and have no idea where I was. So imagine being the mother of a 5-year-old in a house with over 80 secret doors, and you have no idea where he is every morning. But this home was special. It was a place where history and art lived side by side, where people don't just come to look, but to feel, to reflect, to connect with others, and to rediscover something from their childhood. Over the past 45 years, the world outside these walls has changed a lot. But one thing hasn't, our mission. The Old Museum has always been a sanctuary. It's a place that honors those who serve and lifts up those who create. Through our Heroes and Artists in Residence program, we give away more than 1,000 rooms a year to veterans, first responders, and artists who use their gifts to make the world better, often quietly, without recognition. That's why tonight means so much to us. Heaven's Door isn't just a bourbon, it's a story of craft, collaboration, and creative legacy. We're honored to host this tasting, and we're honored to have Jon Marks, Head of Sales and Marketing, and Alex Moore, Master Blender, for a behind-the-scenes look at how these expressions come to life. Created with Bob Dylan, Heaven's Door reflects what we believe here, that real impact doesn't shout, it endures, it leaves its mark quietly but powerfully. Tonight you'll experience some incredible pours. Alex will share more about them, but I can tell you they are exceptional. Each one tells a story, just like every room you walk through or will walk through tonight, full of history, memory, and meaning. Thank you for being here, and please join us in welcoming Jon and Alex.
How's everybody doing? Good. Feeling good?
Yeah. Wonderful.
I heard traffic was a little dicey today, so it's good to see so many smiling faces. Great to have you all here. Thank you guys for being here tonight. Before we get started, I just want to give a big thanks to Z and to H and to everyone here for hosting us tonight. Z reached out to us about 3 months ago with an opportunity to come speak here and share this product and share these stories with all of you. And Alex and I both jumped at this opportunity the minute that we got it. So we're just excited to be with you, and I want to say a huge thank you to you guys and everything you do. We're from Chicago, but this place is legend, and we've heard all about it, and it's just an honor to be here to talk to you all tonight. So I'm going to give you a quick primer on Heaven's Door, but when I say quick, I mean all of you are staring at the whiskey behind me, so I'm not going to talk for too long. We're going to make sure that we get right to drinking very soon. So, amen is right. So I think everyone's familiar with the sort of the origin story, or at least the origin person behind Heaven's Door, which is Bob Dylan. And one of the things that's really interesting about this brand, everyone here can think of, we don't need to speak ill of the other brands in the world, but everyone here can probably think of a celebrity brand or two that sort of just is a shrug your shoulders to some extent. Maybe it's a celebrity who put his or her name on something, maybe it's a celebrity who lent a story to something, but really wasn't necessarily fully integrated with the product. What I think is really cool, and what attracted both of us, I think, to this brand and to these stories, is that this is a brand that was truly started and founded by Bob Dylan. And that really speaks to who Bob Dylan is. And this is not going to be a Bob Dylan history lesson, although we can jump into some Bob Dylan history trivia later on if we want to. But for those of you, anything you know about Bob, you know that he's an artist, he's a musician, but he's always asking what's next. He's always thinking about what's next. He's always creating and curating. One of the most amazing, this personally for me, the story that I heard about Bob Dylan once, I always botch it. I think it was Leonard Cohen who has the quote, who actually said this. Leonard Cohen said that there have been 3 great storytellers in history: Shakespeare, Burns, and Bob Dylan. That's a hell of a list when you think about that list of 3 people. And again, that's what this guy is. And when you think about that, when you hear everything that I just said and talked about, it makes sense that he would then think about what are the products that I can put my name to that can be a creative outlet in another way. Right? I'm already a prolific musician. We're listening to the music, and everyone here is familiar with that. He's a prolific artist. He's a painter. He's a metalworker. And whiskey, in so many ways, is a spirit that is so much about art and craft. You're going to hear Alex talk tonight about the ways that we've created these different pours that we're going to talk about under Heaven's Door. And what I take away, and this is what I've been in whiskey now for 9 years, personally, and the minute that I got attracted to coming and working in this industry in whiskey was when I heard people like Alex talking about the process of creating something. My background is I came from big CPG world, and I worked in candy, and as much as you want to believe that there's these big romantic stories behind how Skittles are made, most of it is you pushed a button on a big factory and the Skittles popped out on the other end. Whiskey, on the other hand, is this beautiful product that is truly artistry and truly craftsmanship. And every single drop of whiskey was tasted by someone at least once to tell you that it was right. It wasn't decided by AI or a computer that this was the right time to do it. And that so speaks to who Bob Dylan is and to the type of person, the type of artist, and the type of, again, prolific creator that he is, that it made sense that he would lend not just his name, but his expertise and his thinking into this brand. So what you're going to hear tonight from Alex are a few stories of different ways that we've brought that whiskey to life with him. I will say one of the most common questions we get is how involved is Bob in the brand? We always joke that Bob's not in the office, but Bob also is not a guy that goes into an office. Bob's still on tour, if you didn't know that. He's been touring for his entire life. I think he's in Germany right now, maybe, or UK, something like that. Guys, out there, he's touring, but he does still lay in on art. He weighs in on paintings. You're going to hear some stories about sort of some of the bottle artwork and things that he did. And he does taste the whiskeys from time to time and helps to weigh in on what he likes. So he's not a passive guy when it comes to this, because I don't know Bob very well, but I can tell you that from everything I know about him, he doesn't seem like he's passive at anything he does. And so it would make sense that he's not very passive at whiskey that bears his name as well. Here we go. So we're excited to take you through a couple things tonight. We're going to start with a pour of our basic bourbon, but basic in the best way. This is our standout. This is the start of our journey as we go together. I'm going to let Alex talk through how all of that comes to life, as well as what our approach is to creating whiskeys and how we've been working with Bob and all of the team at Heaven's Door as we start to go. Sound good?
Yes.
Time to drink? Everyone want to drink? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to hand it over to Alex now. Talk through our first pour of the night.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you again, Z and H. This is phenomenal, and I'm just glad I was able to get here on time because I was upstairs for way too long. All right, as John was saying, this is one of our newest core SKUs. So if there's some industry jargon and you don't know what I'm talking about, please just raise your hand. Sometimes we get caught up in the lingo and the abbreviations. But our core SKU is something that's offered every day. And then our limited time offerings are just that, a limited offering. And we have 2 of those for you here today, as well as a treat at the end. This product is in very much a representation of Bob Dylan, Heaven's Door, and even the ethos that keeps this place going. It is an evolution that was unknown when we started the story, and we pivoted and pivoted, and here we are with a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, when just 4 years ago we were a Tennessee brand. So during the COVID years, we had a lot of opportunity in Kentucky. As everybody knows, Kentucky is very well known for its bourbon. Tennessee also well known. We are not the type of people that believe that an imaginary border means that one place has magical whiskey and the other doesn't. We are very proud of both whiskeys. As we wound up with this opportunity in Kentucky, beautiful historical site on land once settled by Squire Boone, historical buildings on site, and could bring this whiskey alive. We wanted to introduce ourselves to the world of Kentucky with this bourbon. So this is a blend of 2 Kentucky straight bourbons. a mid-rye and a heavy rye bourbon. When I say that, I'm talking about the rye content. So in a bourbon, in order to be called a bourbon, you need to be 51% corn, so predominantly corn. That usually leaves the rye content somewhere in this 8 to 20 range, 20 being the high, 8 being the low. A lot of the brands that you grew up with or see in old movies are that lower to medium rye range. In the past few years, Americans' palates have really opened up and we enjoy that like spice, that kick in the middle. That's what rye gives you. So we have a blend of a medium and a high rye bourbon in this one. We're still a very small brand. As John alluded to, we have a lot of artistry. We cannot just dump 10,000 barrels in a tank and know what it's going to taste like. We are not that size. So by having two different mash bills, it allows us to adjust the percentages and try to create a consistent product, as well as when product ages, sometimes it changes and sometimes like rain falls different on corn in different fields and it ages differently in barrels. So we need that ability to be able to adjust our products.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What we just tasted, was that the Ascension?
That is the Ascension, what you just had in your hand,
That
yes.
sat for 5 years.
Minimum of 5 years, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's between 5 and 7.
How much rye percentage?
So there's a 13% rye in there and a 25% rye. So that's that spicy, meaty body in the middle there that you get. 92 proof, so a little bit over your average proof. You know, if you think of your standards at 80 and that is the minimum it takes to be whiskey and bourbon, we go a little bit higher in the proof and allow you as a consumer the ability to bring it down to how you like it or keep it where it's at.
So one of the things that I think as you start to taste through the stuff tonight, you heard Alex talk about, and one of the ways that I like to think about some of these products is think about it as what's the intent, and then ask yourself if the intent was delivered on. And what you hear Alex talk about is the different levers that we can pull to give and to sort of deliver that intent. So a lot of bourbons, a lot of people, if you've gone to a bourbon tasting or heard from many of the matriarchs and patriarchs of the industry, a lot of bourbons claim their mash bill, or they claim their recipe as the core of what they do. And that is a way that you can deliver great, consistent products over the years. And the way that we look at this is we look at it as an art project, for lack of a better phrase. We look at it as a painting we want to paint. And so our intent for an Ascension, for what you guys are tasting right now, was a Kentucky product, Kentucky bourbon. But that blending you hear Alex talk about is a way of giving it something a little bit different, something a little bit special. Also taking some of the bite off. Everyone here has probably had at least one bourbon that made them gag a little bit, a little too strong, a little bit too much flavor. That's okay, right? Those are great, they have their role. For us, we wanted to make sure there was something that was a little bit more approachable. The way you do that is through the blending and through the different things that Alex was talking about. And that really is the way that we look at it. It's similar to the way, if you think about, sometimes an artist might sit down and say, I don't know what I'm going to paint, but I'm just going to start painting and see what it is. There's always something in their mind of a direction they would have headed. And doesn't mean that they know exactly how they're going to get there, but they kind of know the direction there as they go. And that's the way that we really approach for all the different whiskeys that you're going to taste tonight going forward. I saw a hand up there.
Yeah, this might be a stupid question. I don't know.
There's no such thing as stupid.
I don't know a lot about bourbon, but you said that it had 13% and 25%. Does that mean there's two different ryes in here, or two different types of rye? Or?
So correct, it's the blend of the two different bourbons. So the two different bourbons have two different mash bills, one being that medium, that 78% corn, 13% rye, and the second one being a 70% corn, 25%.
But it's all in the same shot. Really.
So different barrels that we then blend together before
Gotcha.
they go into the bottle. Yeah.
Oh,
And then one thing to add on top of what John was saying, that particular bite or that strength that you sometimes feel in a whiskey or I don't know, a vodka, whatever else. That spirit is actually, our taste buds are not designed to take in very hot spirits, right? So we have something we like to call in Kentucky a Kentucky chew. And that's where when you first take your sip of whiskey, similar to a wine, you might want to take it give it a swirl. We call that the chew, which is where you're gonna treat it like mouthwash. Bring it around your mouth. You'll get that tinge, that singeing sensation. Bring it down, spit it out, however you want to treat the tasting. But then I like to say change the subject. Don't think about it. Don't analyze the whiskey. Go right into the next topic and allow yourself to adjust before going back into it. And what you'll always find is it's not just the whiskey opening up, it's also your palate adjusting to be able to bring out those flavors. And your second, your third, your fourth, that's when you really hit the sweet spot. And some of these whiskeys we're going to pour in are up over 120 proof, so you don't want to.
That truly is a cool parlor trick, though, that I will say. Now that if you didn't notice it before, you will notice it now. Not just in today's tastings, but anytime you taste going forward. Now that you are looking out for it, look out for how it changes as you taste it. That goes for even sometimes a cocktail. Even sometimes that first pour of a cocktail, that first sip, we can all picture that cocktail we might have gotten. We're like, I don't know if I like that. And then all of a sudden you come back to it 3 or 4 minutes later, you're like, ooh, there's something going on there. That's your taste buds kind of opening up.
Tell us about the smell. Tell us about the nose. So that obviously helps as well.
So the question was about the nose, which is another way of saying it's about the smell. The smell that comes off the whiskey.
So a lot of your flavor receptors are going to come through on your nose. So there's going to be a million different ways of people telling you how to taste whiskey, and I would say whatever you appreciate and like the best is the correct way. But often what you're going to hear is keeping your mouth open as you're breathing in through your nose, and you're going to allow that vapor to really travel through, and you're going to get more flavors through it. I also very much like to swirl the whiskey, open it up. When you take in that nose, take a moment and even smell your skin and go back to it, and you're going to really be able to differentiate between the environment and what's in the whiskey. These glasses aren't the best for it. There's a lot of opening there. But you can still, don't be afraid to get your nose in there and really try to think.
Is this the one that's 120?
This one, no, this one's exploration that we're pouring right now.
So we have exploration in front of you now. This is 108 proof.
100 and what?
8.
Proof is alcohol. So your alcohol content, if you're 40%, proof is just an American standard of measurement. Yes, ma'am.
Does the type of barrel that that the whiskey is fermented in, or whatever the terminology is, does that matter? Like, does that have to be seasoned, or?
That's the most important question we've ever got.
Oh, God!
The question was, does the type of barrel and the way that the barrel is used matter in the production of the whiskey?
Yeah.
So the barrel does have.
The barrel has quite possibly the most dramatic effect on the whiskey. Yeah, barrel and time. So what you have in front of you now, this second offering, the exploration, is exactly that. It's an exploration into wood. So one of Heaven's Door's efforts is to try to be a more sustainable curator for our future, right? We have the bourbon standard of identity requires virgin oak barrels every single time. And if you read an article on the 13 million barrels in Kentucky right now, that's coming from 7 million trees. You're only getting a very few amount of barrels out of the tree. The tree has to age for 80 to 100 years before you can fill it. So this is a practice that creates terrific product. It is very difficult to sustain that over time as our population increases, right? So it's not just white oak that makes incredible flavors. You have French oak, we have Hungarian oak. I mean, we have all the different types of Quercus alba. What we want to do is explore those different types of oak and figure out how we can play with those different flavors, but also how we can do it sustainably, because we don't want to take down a tree, a 100-year-old tree every time we want to experiment with the whiskey. So what we did here, Bob Dylan was actually on tour in France. We like to use his tour schedule as inspiration. So we found a cooperage, or rather found a Calvados distillery in Normandy, and were able to acquire a bunch of their Calvados casks. These barrels have been used about 10 different times over 12 years for various batches of Calvados. Calvados is a apple brandy. Bringing those home, we put our bourbon in those casks for finishing. That's going to give you a different flavor from both French oak and toasted French oak versus a white American charred barrel, as well as it's going to pick up some of the Calvados flavor from within those staves. So there are two things happening with a barrel that have the most impact on your whiskey. One is the barrel is filtering impurities from your whiskey. That charred layer is actually acting as a carbon filter. And then it's also releasing flavors that from when the whiskey permeates the wood and then comes back out. It's extracting flavors. So it's cleaning the whiskey and extracting flavors from the wood. So we use this Calvados cask to get different wood flavors as well as Calvados flavors. And then in an effort to be more sustainable and add another layer of complexity on, we grabbed French oak staves. So rather than making the barrel, we're able to use a very scientific approach to it and measure surface area on lab samples. So you end up with a small sample called a lab sample. And you're going to say, okay, a gallon of whiskey with 2 inches of surface area on this French oak give me this type of flavors. Then we hone in on what we really like, and then we actually put those staves, those chunks of wood, through, for lack of a better term, an MRI machine, and we're able to analyze what's going on in this wood to give it those flavors, and then scan a whole bunch of wood and pull out those different staves that were giving those flavors, use the exact surface area to then go into our big blending tanks once we dump the Calvados cask and impart the toasted nutmeg, the fall flavors that you're getting out of this now. So you have the bourbon, which has its classic flavors. This is actually a Tennessee bourbon. Then added with the Calvados, which gives it that bright apple fruit, and then toasted French oak staves, which went through that process I just explained to give it those baking spices and layer it all together. This was, I think, one of the more fun projects I've ever got to work on, and really it's part of this brand is the freedom to do this type of stuff. I mean, John came to us from Beam Suntory, and I imagine to going through your R&D process, you probably need to ask a lot of people a lot of questions, get a lot of sign-offs and budgeting. And for this, I mean, it was a completely blank canvas, and they just said, what are you interested in? We got to go meet with Coopers, go meet with the Forestry Service and talk about how detrimental culling so much oak is, and that's a, you know, we could go on for that forever, but in good and bad ways. But I mean, this is a really cool brand that allows you to just play jazz. It's
again,
one of our fun.
I think, again, that speaks very much to what we're trying to do and what we're trying to show. And again, that's very much the Bob Dylan approach as well, of just trying to find things, trying to not just leave behind for the next generation, but also just try to find new ways to do things. Anyone who's followed the arc of his career has seen that arc has taken a lot of different detours throughout its time. The Bob Dylan, that everyone who thinks they know Bob, they have a very specific opinion of him, or impression of what it is, and many of those impressions are all very different. And that's really cool. There's not a lot of musicians and a lot of artists like that have changed so much over time. And this, to Alex's point, was an opportunity for us to kind of honor that as well. So we've got our kind of core, our base products, but then how do we actually go off and start to shift some other ways around the whiskey world, like what you're drinking right now, which is the exploration version. Any questions on that one before we give you guys your next pour?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Between Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee.
Yeah, so the question is the difference between Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee bourbon. You want to take that one? You want to take that one? All right, Alex is drinking. So actually there's a subtlety to that question that I'll come back to on there. So bourbon itself has a very specifically legislated standard of identity. There's a couple things that have to be true for something to be a bourbon. It has to be made of at least 51% corn. It has to use virgin white oak, which is what Alex was talking about earlier. That means that the barrel has just been made, charred, but never been used before. And a couple other things that technically make it bourbon. It has to be made in America is the most important one. It is not necessarily true, or is technically not true at all, that it has to be made in Kentucky. It just happens to be that about 92% of the world's bourbon comes out of Kentucky, with the rest of the world's bourbon coming out from a few other places. And we actually happen to have, we're not pouring it tonight, but we actually happen to have a Tennessee bourbon, which was distilled in Tennessee following the exact same rules of bourbon making. It just happens to be distilled in Tennessee versus Kentucky. There's a couple things that you start to see. The water source is a little bit different, so you get a little bit of a difference in terms of the flavor on Tennessee bourbon versus Kentucky bourbon. Sometimes the grains are a little bit different, but generally speaking, bourbon is bourbon. And then where it is made and the distillery it's made in is really the biggest distinguishing factor for bourbon itself. There also is Tennessee whiskey. So everyone here has probably had a Jack Daniel's pour. Some people here might have had a Jack Daniel's pour they don't want to remember. So included sometimes. That very much is Tennessee whiskey. And the nuance there, the distinction there, is that actually goes through a charcoal mellowing process. That's what gives that kind of funk on the end that makes Jack Daniel's such a distinct flavor. That is a technically different process. So it starts as essentially bourbon, but once it gets mellowed through charcoal, it's no longer allowed to be called a bourbon. One of the things that makes bourbon also as part of its standards is that you cannot add anything to it. So many whiskeys around the world have caramel coloring, or Tennessee whiskey has charcoal mellowing. Bourbons cannot have anything added to the process and still be called a bourbon. So when you see something called a bourbon, you know it is to some extent the most pure expression you can get, because nothing has touched it except for grains, with at least 51% of those grains being corn, virgin white oak, water, and a big old barrel aged for a period of time. And it is that simple in there. And then the rest of it kind of is how you build upon it from there.
Now, what was that we just drank?
You just drank, it was 102, right?
I'm not sure which one you just had. The second pour was 108. The third pour is 100. 50% alcohol.
So proof is percent alcohol by volume times 2. So if you hear 100, that means it's 50% alcohol by volume. Yeah.
Can you expound a little on the cleaning process that you mentioned?
The cleaning process.
Yeah.
The question was expound on the cleaning process that Alex mentioned.
So I think what you're referring to is the cleaning process of the whiskey in the barrel, right? So that's part of that charcoal layer. When you're toasting a barrel, so barrels can be treated many different ways, right? They can be a commodity, and you're trying to get as many barrels out the door as you can, and then there's the older ways, and really what's happening is in the ideal barrel, especially for bourbon, you're gonna air dry it for no less than 2 years. While you're air drying it, all sorts of fungus and bacteria and whatnot are getting in the cellulose of that wood, and they're breaking down some carbons, and they're changing and altering the makeup of that wood. That's where you're going to get a lot of flavors. To expand on those flavors and even change them a little bit, just like searing a steak, we're then going to toast the barrel. You toast the barrel, especially if you're using wood debris to do the tasting. There are some shortcuts now, like infrared or kilns and whatnot, to get that toasting done. But it's preferred if you use that same wood debris. You're going to create a toast. Once you get to about 6,500 degrees, 600, 700 degrees, the wood is actually going to combust and turn into flame. And that's when you see the white and the blue, and that flame erupts And then you're gonna start the charring, and that's just like your marshmallow on the campfire. You get it near, you start to see it turn brown and you're toasting. Then once it hits that flame, you're getting a sear layer. That sear layer is activated carbon and will actually clean some of the longer chain carbons out of your bourbon. So some of those esters, we actually really like esters in bourbon, but that's that oiliness, that's that chemical compound that you can feel on your mouth like an oil. Can also give you a really bad hangover, but it also gives you a ton of flavor. So it's always this balance between
Hangover versus flavor.
Exactly. So that time in the barrel, it's gonna clean through that charbon layer, that charcoal layer, and then enter the barrel into the toasted layer and pull out a bunch of extracted flavors.
Thank you.
And then what John was talking about before with the Tennessee whiskey, they actually use maple charcoal, and that's an activated charcoal, and they filter it through this, like after the distillation process, they filter it before it enters the barrel. So that's why you may get less. People from Tennessee will kill me for saying this, but you may get less layers of flavor. You may have a less complex whiskey, but it's going to be incredibly smooth and mellow. That Tennessee mellow whiskey, that's because it's been double filtered before through activated charcoal before it goes into the barrel, and then inside. And then if you want to really dive into it, it's the seasons within the barrel, right? So when you're in a rick house and it's not temperature controlled, all those temperature swings are going to affect the amount of permeation that your whiskey's getting in the barrel. We call those seasons. So it's not just one summer within a summer. You get 20 summers in a summer because it goes from hot to cold, hot to cold. Let's start on this side and work our way down.
Good information in Kentucky, bourbon in comparison to Tennessee. Kentucky has natural limestone spring waters that makes it in particular to that kind of, to the bourbon.
Absolutely. Tennessee and Kentucky have incredible limestone quarries. And that's the reason why they're known for the horses as well, right? And you have the Tennessee Walker, and then you obviously Kentucky Derby thoroughbreds. I mean, that
Tennessee Walker.
that's so limestone does a lot for crops. It does a lot for horses, and it sure does a lot for bourbon.
Okay, I just have a stupid question. So when you're talking about Kentucky and Tennessee bourbons, as it applies to what we're tasting, are you getting bourbons from these states and as part of the blend, or and you're blending them together? So you're where's the corn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question was when we're talking about different provenance of bourbons, are we getting them from those states?
So that's
The answer is yes.
So that's why it's important to, I
Exactly, and that's really where Alex's expertise lies, is in the sort of the idea being that we do have our own distillery, we do make our own whiskey. We actually are just probably in the next 3 months going to start putting some of that whiskey on the market. One thing you can't do is you can't speed up time.
Right.
So we've been making it for 5.5 years. It just took a little while to get it out. So that'll start to come out soon. But in the interim and all that time, we also have a very fundamental belief within this brand. And to be totally candid, I just have this fundamental belief. We just believe this about whiskey, that there's great whiskey from a lot of great places. And it's not about there's only one place you can get great whiskey, but it is about what you do with it once you've got it. And that's a lot of where Alex comes in.
Where are you guys from?
We're from Chicago.
Okay, so you're going to start a new brand like Chicago whiskey?
There actually is one down the street from us called Cabal. Actually, literally like half a block away from us is Cabal whiskey. It actually does exactly that very much. So I do think that's important for us, is that we do taste a lot of things. Him more than me. His office looks like a mad scientist lab, but like a fun mad scientist lab because it's all booze. And we taste a lot of things, and that is very much about not just finding something that tastes good, but then also when you blend things together. And that's one of the coolest things I'd say about the work that he does and that his team does. There's times when you might taste something and it might not taste perfect on its own, but you can pick out something about it. There's something interesting, and it turns out that when you blend that into a finished blend, all of a sudden, what that does, it actually makes the entire thing come together. And that's where this is truly artistry and truly not generated by a computer. It is truly very much like, I've tasted blends before where one of the components was like, I can't even tell you how bad it was. It made me gag. If you drank it on your own, it was just disgusting. But I gotta tell you, I tasted then the finished blend with and without that thing that made me gag. It's night and day. And that's what's beautiful about this process, is that with people like Alex who have that expertise in being able to pull those things out, and those, even when he was talking about like the testing and the MRI machine and trying to figure those pieces there, you can actually pull things out of whiskeys that maybe even the source distilleries didn't have before. That's what I think.
But you also kind of need to have someone that has those taste buds. It's almost like a wine person that has, you know what I mean? Like not everybody can taste that whiskey and say, oh, this is it.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember
that's the art in it too.
That's very much the artist. My first meeting at Beam, this was again 10 years ago, we were sitting around a table with all of our R&D team. Jim Beam's great-grandson's at the table talking about his thing, and everyone writes down notes on a first tasting. And I just wrote down in my notebook, like, tastes really good. And I didn't really know what else to say. And these guys are walking around with these big, like, I can taste the so-and-so and the this and this. And I'm just like, I liked option B. I thought option B tasted really good. And that's when I learned that's why I do the sales and marketing side. And that's why I have Alex here for the other side. But we all have our roles to play in every single way.
I think it's also important to point out that with our brand, you know, there are mass market brands that try to appease everybody, and we very much think that there's a whiskey for an occasion, and that is also can be very difficult on the blending side of the business, and for Jon when he's trying to sell it, I wouldn't end my night with Ascension, but I would sure start it there. You know, there's a whiskey for every occasion, and we like that it tells a story. That's part of the brand ethos, and we try to create different whiskeys, at least that are differentiated enough that we have an offering for what you're doing that day.
Really quickly before we take another question, the third pour that you guys have, I just want to tell you a little bit about what you got on your third pour, and then we'll jump back into Q&A. So what you've tasted so far, you tasted our Kentucky bourbon, the start of the journey. You tasted it's called Exploration Series 1, the Calvados finish. You heard all about the wood. I'm going to let Alex talk about the Decade Series. So the third pour you've got is their Decade Series 3. We did 3 of these. We wanted to bring this one for 2 reasons. One, it's a 10-year-old product, so you're going to get a taste of the age, and what the impact of age does. The second is it's actually a blend of bourbons and rye together as well. So you've got some age, you've got some blending, etc. So I'll let Alex talk a little bit about that, and we'll jump back into questions. But that way you'll know what you're tasting as you're drinking that third pour right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like we're not married to any particular mash bill, sometimes we even wander between standards of identity, and can love a bourbon and love a rye, and that 1% corn difference that changes it maybe isn't all that large of a threshold. So in exploring with that, we wound up with a blend of, again, 2 different bourbons. One was a Tennessee whiskey and a Tennessee bourbon, aged 10 years. And then we added a rye made from our good friends in Indiana. The rye was spectacular, absolutely spectacular on its own, as were the bourbons, but we really wanted to explore what would happen if we added them. It rounded out the product into something a bit more meaty. And then to really make it pop and differentiate it from our other products, we threw the rye by itself in a toasted new American oak barrel. So that same barrel that you'd be using for bourbon, but we just wanted to up the tannin level a small bit, and not really detract from the mouthfeel, so it was just a toasted barrel. It got to the point where we were happy with it, but it just really needed a little something extra. We had just bottled the bootleg 6 that you have here, which is a 12, 13, 14, and maybe even a dash 15-year-old wheated bourbon from Wyoming. We had a little bit left over from that, so we actually used the dredges of that tank, and we added about 2% of the bootleg into this product, and it really just gave it the little something extra that kind of lingers on the back end, and that's that wheat.
Cool. Yeah, right there.
So I have a question. Now that we went down the origins of it, now if you're trying to stay slim and trim like a bicycle round, what is the most healthiest version? Like, is it 100 proof so I can sweat it out?
Yeah.
Or like, is that like the health benefits and you have a skinny version? Or like, what's wrong with that?
Slim and trim like a bicycle ramp. There you go. It's a great question. Genuinely a great question. So the sad answer, the unfortunate answer is that calories and alcohol tend to come from alcohol by volume. So unfortunately, the 100 proof is not any healthier than the 80 proof. The healthier versions tend to be the lower proof versions that are there. So that's if you're looking for that. So, in theory, what I'll say is like cocktails tend to be very sugary. So if you want the skinniest version of a good drink, then you just whiskey on the rocks can tend to be that piece there. But generally speaking, all spirits at the same proof level have roughly the same calorie count. It's not always the same. Whiskey, unfortunately, tends to have a little bit higher because of the grain content, but you're within 10 or 20 of them.
But they have sugar. They don't have as much sugar as others.
They don't have as much sugar, especially as in cocktails as well. So it is sort of whiskey, generally speaking, there's literally only 3 things that go into whiskey. It's grains, it's yeast, and it's water. And so there's not any of these other additives that can sometimes cause things to go. But I'll tell a story. I've told the story. He's heard this so many times, he's going to roll his eyes at me. But one of the things I'll say about the question there, we did a project at Beam for a while trying to figure out what if we did like a 40 proof Jim Beam, like a low proof Jim Beam. And I go back to, I mentioned earlier I used to work for Mars, for Candy, actually right down the road in McLean, over here. We had a new CEO of Mars come in, this was 10, 15 years ago. It was right around when the health craze had started to pick up. Right around when people were starting to think about the healthier versions, and someone had raised their hand and said, when are you going to start to make healthier Skittles? And the CEO, this is his first day. The CEO looks at this person. He wasn't trying to be like mean, he was kind of funny. He goes, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? And he said, I don't think anyone wants healthier Skittles. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that you always know how many calories are in a pack of Skittles. So I'm going to make sure that there's, you think about like any candy you see, there's always the calories on the front of it. I'm going to give you a bunch of different sizes so that when you're mindlessly eating, you might eat the smaller one, just the bigger one. I'm going to make sure you know what you're eating, but I'm also going to say, eating Skittles is just a fun, indulgent thing, and I don't want to take that away from you. And I think that's a nice way that, personally for me, that I think about spirits as well, is that there's definitely ways that you can, again, lower sugar content from cocktails or whatever it is, but there's also, like, find the thing that you enjoy, and then enjoy it in the moderation that you want to enjoy it. Because it's not necessarily always about finding that lower proof thing. Again, 40 proof Jim Beam is just Jim Beam and water. Right? That's what it is. 40 proof anything is that's just more water in there. So you can make it yourself. But for us, we want to give you a product for every occasion and give you the ability to kind of decide how to drink it. I always think about that Skittles story. It's like one of my favorite stories to tell. Just don't take away the reason necessarily for what you enjoy it, but give you the choice on how you want to enjoy it in the best way possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what is the shelf life of bourbon before you open it, and then what is it after you open it?
Yes, the question was about shelf life of bourbon, both before you open it and then after you open it. Take that one.
In a contained environment, an unsealed bottle, there'll be very little change over time. There will be change, especially if you're on a natural cork. So just like wine can overage, it has to do with the cork. And in reality with the whiskey, it's such a high alcohol content that it's never going to get to a point where it'll make you sick or anything like that, but the flavors will change, it will oxidize. So if you find that bottle of bourbon under the stairs in a house from 1850, if it's got liquid above the halfway mark, it's good to drink. It just may not taste good.
Right. And then once it's opened, how long can you have it on the shelf?
I would say that really depends on your surface area. So if you're over half a bottle, there's not a ton of oxygen in there, and you're safe for years. If you are down below a third a bottle, I wouldn't give it much more than a few months.
That is a good pro tip, by the way. If if you've got that third of a bottle, a quarter of a bottle you're hanging on to for a special occasion, which every one of us has something like that, something really special there.
That special occasion is tomorrow.
That special occasion is tomorrow. Because unfortunately, that special occasion that you think is 3 or 4 years from now, it's not going to taste as good as what it is now. So always keep an eye on that, an eye on how much air and headspace you've got.
And again, the beauty is to the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, we had a 1972 chartreuse the other day. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was old and oxidized. But it was great.
Still great though. Yeah, sure.
Going off of his question earlier, you mentioned experimenting with wood and how the barrel's made and cleaned and the different bacteria and fungi. Has there been, just with new technologies, has there been any effort to try to isolate those bacteria and fungi and see how that affects different flavors?
Yeah, so the question was just the conversation about wood, fungi, cleaning the barrels, etc. Has there been any recent technology or research to try to isolate those different variables and how they affect the different flavors within the process?
There's been a lot of research on how to flavor whiskey or how to cheat time a little bit. I would say those bacteria and fungi aren't necessarily what are adding to the flavor. It's their breakdown of the wood that's changing it. So it's not so much that there's that one little mushroom in between the staves that's adding the flavor. It's the rot that it's given the wood that is changing the flavor. And rot's an ugly word, but
Almost like cheese.
Yeah, go for it.
What's a good, like, smoke cigars? What's a good cigar pair with any of them?
I'm sorry, I don't know my cigars.
I don't know if any of y'all.
I don't know my cigars well enough on this one.
I can tell you, I really enjoy a cigar with a whiskey, but I don't really ever know the cigar in my hand, to be honest.
So you don't smoke either?
No, what I will say is this. The one thing I think both of us have found is sort of the opposite of the healthier question. The stronger, bolder flavor that you get out of the whiskey. So something like, we're going to talk about bootleg in a second. This is a really, really meaty, big flavor. That's the way that I look for. So versus, I can't speak to which brands of cigars, but I would say actually if you're going to smoke a cigar, you want something with a little more body on the whiskey that'll hold up to the flavor of the tobacco in your mouth too. So that's a my pro tip for that one. But, yeah, that's a good segue into bootleg, which we're not going to taste. We're not going to pour out for tasting, but we were very happy to pour for you afterward if you guys want to come up and taste it. One of the things we've talked about Bob as an artist repeatedly, and we're using the word artist very deliberately. Most people think of Bob as a musician because quite literally that's what he's very, very well known for. But he really is a prolific artist, painter, metalworker. Actually, on each of the bottles, these little squares are not just pretty icons. These are actually Bob's metalwork. He makes these gates out of found items, and he's got this really deep, rich love for the idea of metalworking and what metalworking and the idea of gates together. So it's a nice little metaphor for Heaven's Door and the gates of Heaven's Door. And this is his artwork. So again, these are not things that we came up with. These are actual, very miniature representations of what it is. But really, when it comes to Bob's art, some of the most spectacular things he creates are paintings. And one of the things that really founded this brand years and years ago was the idea of not just creating beautiful whiskey, but how do you create beautiful whiskeys that actually pair together with one of his paintings in some way. And I'll let Alex talk about 6 in a second, but what you can see in each of these, and we've done 6 of these so far. This is called, we call this the bootleg series. Each one has a painting on the front of it. So I'll hold this up, do a little show and tell for this. These bottles here, this is Bob Dylan's painting. We've done 6 that have, again, Bob's artwork on each one of them. And then really one of the more fun challenges goes to Alex after we pick a painting. And it's about how do we actually figure out what would an interesting way to pair a whiskey with a painting be. Again, a way to honor not just Bob's artwork, but actually honor the process of creation for whiskey. So I'm going to let Alex talk about bootleg. We didn't pour this right off the bat for everybody, just in case anyone had too much whiskey. But sometimes there's no such thing as too much whiskey, and we're very happy to pour this for you guys after. But I'm going to let Alex talk about this for a second, then we got one more thing after that that we'll finish up with.
So this one's fun because it's a happy mistake. One of the things about working with an artist and one that is on tour all the time is sometimes he has different priorities and sometimes those priorities conflict with us. And when we were choosing the artwork and how to go about this bottle that we release every year, and we usually start the day after or even before that previous edition launches. So we're working well over a year in advance to make this product come to life. Even though the paintings are done and a bottle isn't necessarily a 13-month lead time, sometimes the whiskey takes that. So on this one, we had all agreed to go with a cowboy image, which had this rustic gentleman, hat down over his eyes, boots up on the bar top, and we came up with the idea for this cowboy whiskey. So what better place to source cowboy whiskey than from our stock that we had originally gotten from Wyoming. It was a wheated whiskey from Wyoming, very much grain to glass, and pairing it with a cigar cask. However, that cigar cask isn't something that was typically aged or used to age tobacco. It's more the shape of the cask. So these casks have this elongated tubular look, much like a cigar tube would. And what that allows is more surface area on the barrel, right? So if we think of a barrel and all that flavor extraction and filtering I was talking about before, there's only that layer out of the 53-gallon vessel where you're reaching that. If you elongate it and you have this big submarine tube, you're getting a lot more of that out. So we recoopered those casks from the Vosges region of France, and our goal there was a particular type of cask that it aged rye in it previously, so you had that kick that the rye gives. And then we recoopered, which meant we recharred and had all that surface area. And we're going for leather tobacco, Western whiskey. Imagine a cowboy jumping off the saddle and giving you something out of his flask. That's what we were going for. And then, right as we are pretty happy with where the whiskey's at and getting ready, we changed our mind. And on the Flavella.
By right, it's like literally we were about to go to print on the bottles the next day.
So we had this terrific whiskey, and now we had new artwork. Fortunately, there's a long history of these barrels being used in trade between Europe and Brazil. So we were able to put a bit of a marketing spin on it and say this is an attachment that makes sense. However, the whiskey at that point was something we were truly proud of, and it fit the bill with a little bit of spin, so that's what we have on there.
Yes, this painting is of Brazilian favelas, and these are real. We actually have the source image of what he came from. That's very much. Again, happy to pour a little bit of that for you guys later, if you guys want to try something else too. Yeah?
Yeah. I have a question about the art. Did Dylan create this for the bottle, or was this something that was it a previous work and then they just applied it to it?
Yeah, so the question is, did Dylan create the art for the bottle, or was it a previous work that was just applied to it? A lot of these are previous works that he has. The Halcyon Gallery in London tends to be his largest collection of artworks, but there's other places that have some artwork, and there's a couple celebrities that own some pieces of it as well. So he hasn't created anything specific, especially for the brand, but we've talked to him about it before. Same with the gates. The gates are something that he's created in his past, but then we've talked about him creating special pieces for us as well, and we're still working through what that can be as we go. So, we have one more treat for you guys, and then happy to answer any other questions you guys have. We're going to take a bit of a detour, very much away from Bob Dylan for a second. So Alex and I work for a company that we actually create a few different brands. We've talked to you about Heaven's Door tonight, we've talked about Bob Dylan. obviously at length. There's another brand that that the company came out with a few years ago that's been very, very much in a very limited release. The brand's called Rare Hair. Rare Hair. And wouldn't be surprised if many of you haven't heard of it. It's a very limited distribution, very, very much this play on indulgence, and how do we think about it, and also the idea of global influences, so it's not just always an American whiskey. It came out, and really the first 4 releases of this brand were $1,000 bottles, only a couple thousand made, very, very limited again, and everything about its scale. Our most recent one of those, for example, was a 20-year-old whiskey from Tasmania, which is actually a place, not just a thing in the cartoons, that is it's an island off the coast of Australia. 20 years old doesn't sound that old when you think about Scotch until I tell you that distilling was prohibited in Tasmania until the mid-90s. So it's actually some of the oldest whiskey that's ever been made from that region. It's a really special, indulgent whiskey. So those products have been out there for a few years. Again, very, very much, very hard to find. And one of the things that we're coming out with right now is actually we wanted to create a couple versions of that brand and a couple versions of those products that are a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier to get to. And we are starting to roll that out across the country. It's not actually available in DC yet. But we actually bootlegged these ones on the plane this morning. Wanted to give you a chance just to taste it. You should start to see it in the coming months, but we wanted to give you a chance just to have a special pour of something you can't get anywhere else around here. So we're going to pass this out. This is the Rare Hair 7-year-old. I'm going to let Alex talk about the whiskey for it as well. Again, not related to Bob Dylan, not related to Heaven's Door, but is something else that we are working on. And we've got a 7-year-old, we've got a 15-year-old that's coming out, and then a 20-year-old that'll be coming out in January as well. You'll start to see more out. We just wanted you to be the first people in Washington, D.C. to be able to taste this. That's pretty cool. I'll let Alex talk about what you're tasting as we hand out the stuff.
So this one, again, 7 years old. This is a blend of a bourbon and a light whiskey. Light whiskey is a whiskey that is distilled at a higher point off of the still and then aged in used casks versus new casks. So again, we're looking at prolonging life of whiskey in our forests. This seemed like a good way to do that. It's a very approachable whiskey, being that a blend of light whiskey and your bourbon. It's a very smooth, mellow, almost that Tennessee mellow whiskey. So very different profile, especially from all of these robust ones you had before. But whiskey for every occasion.
Whiskey for every occasion. We've got an announcement coming.
Since everybody in here is media, I'd like to call H. Leonard and D. Stein up front, because rather than move from here with you to the other room and conduct interviews, I think that it would be more appropriate, since we're all here, for the two of them to join you. And several of you who have come in have asked, how did the partnership between Old Museum and the Mansion come about with the Bob Dylan brand? So hopefully that will be the first question that they answer, because about 5 or 6 of you asked me that question. So if I can have UZ and H join them here so that we don't have to change rooms for the media interviews, since everybody in here almost is media.
I will answer the first question, which is the best question. I'm glad you asked this. I don't know how many years ago, but someone came to me and asked if we would be interested in being the first place in Washington that had the Bob Dylan Heaven's Door bourbon here. And they told me the whole story, but they told me a story that I don't know if you know this or anyone else knows this, and why we got involved, because Bob is very reticent and he doesn't talk a lot about who he is and what he does. But when Uncle Nearest came out and decided they were going to create a bourbon honoring Uncle Nearest, Bob heard about it and knew how many years it would take to make the bourbon, and he donated $1 million worth of his bourbon so that they could come out of the gates.
So the inspiration is the flavor.
And that's how I got involved. I'm on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so I was an easy person for them to come and say, hey, are you interested?
So back in there, one.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
That's the name of the bottle right here.
Yes.
And to add to that, Uncle Nearest and Heaven's Door still use, Uncle Nearest and Heaven's Door still use the same supplier, share the same supplier in Tennessee for all the Tennessee whiskey and bourbon that we use.
This rare
hair. Yes.
1961.
Did you notice the top of the bottle?
Yeah,
They put it down the
so if you have their hand something to do with it.
So when you finally reach, when you finally reach the stores, how do we get to support the brand? How do we get to know when it comes to this? It's one support the brand. Right here.
Thank you for that. Well, so we will be rolling it out in the next couple months. We'll make sure that you all know, we'll get all of your information, we'll make sure you know when it's here, and we'll make sure that it's here for sure, as well as in any stores that are around here. We really appreciate that. Again, we'll have the 7, the 15 out, and then hopefully the 20 very soon as well. Thank you for that question. We'll make sure that you are aware as soon as it hits the shores of DC. We have a distributor, we're ready to go with it, and we're excited to start to roll it out soon.
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. Marks, M-A-R-K-S. M-A-R-K-S. Chief Revenue and Marketing Officer.
What do you think? It's a little bit lighter.
Are there any more questions? Because what we're gonna do is take all of the interviews here, Eric, in here, rather than going to the other room.
Okay.
So, just to make it convenient for everybody. So, are you all ready for your interviews or?
And also, just make sure that, I got drunk.
I think we all do.
You want to take a plate of food or eat some bread before you drive home?
I think we all do.
It's marathon.
We're also, in case some of y'all haven't had enough, we're gonna throw this over at the bar there, and you're welcome to.
Please. Please enjoy it.
I like
So I'm waiting on the questions rather than move into the next room where we just want to conduct all of the interviews in here. All right?
I have a quick one. I just wanted to know your favorites personally.
We love all of them.
We have no favorite.
I'm just kidding. Personally, my favorite, I love bigger flavors, really interesting flavors. So we tasted the Decade version 3, which was a bourbon and rye blend. We actually also have another double barrel version that's a lower price version. It's not 10 years old. That's my personal favorite. It's bourbon, it's rye, it's double barrel. It's just got a lot going on in it. It's got 100 proof. It stands up with a long cocktail. So that's my personal favorite. That one you can find in the liquor store. We did not bring that with us. We wanted to pour you guys the really special stuff there. That one's a little bit more available. That's my personal favorite one.
Okay,
All else,
how much rye is in that? That one is just
that one.
That's a rather low percentage, I think it's 8%.
Rye is a very fickle grain. Think about the smell of rye bread and how strong the smell of rye bread is. So you don't need a lot of rye grain, and you don't need a lot of rye whiskey when you're blending with it. It can really overpower the entire thing if you put too much in. What's about your favorite one?
Yeah, my favorite, well, if we're at a restaurant or somewhere with all products readily available, and with Jon Revelation, it's typically the one I hone in on. But out of the fun of creating something, it's definitely the exploration. That one was a fun trip.
Okay.
Do you guys see home distillation laws relaxing anytime soon, or not really?
Home distillation laws relaxing anytime soon. I don't know. I don't know if the laws are going to relax, and I also don't know if people are going to want to do it. I think distillation is really hard and really capital intensive. So I genuinely don't know the answer, but I would
Just
say,
like a 1 gallon batch or something
Yeah,
like that.
I mean-
Just experiment yourself or something.
I think people, I'm willing to bet that we'll start to see that start to expand. The other thing I'll say though is there are, you've probably seen press articles and things like that about certain places where there's been dangerous spirits that are out there. Like, it is possible to distill and actually create a very dangerous spirit. So I will also say that that's like buying a branded product, you don't need to worry about that. That's gone through the regulation, all that. And I'd actually be surprised if they relaxed simply for that reason. Because there are so many things you can do wrong in creating a spirit that can actually cause, this isn't like it tastes bad cause, it can actually cause harm. So my guess is that they'll play with that. If there's fire, there's poison, like they'll probably play with those balance. Exactly. So I'm not sure. It's a good question, but I would not be surprised if it stays strict out of the interest of health. I don't think it's the interest of taxes or anything like that. I think it's the interest of making sure that everyone's safe, because it is possible to do that.
I'd like to ask a question. Can you tell me, starting from the first, I think it's been, what, 5? Certain, but what the cost levels are?
Absolutely. So the first one that you drank, so I'm going to quote what we call suggested retail price. So this is our recommended pricing. All pricing is at the discretion of the liquor store you're at. This is recommended pricing. So the Ascension that you drank first, that's about $45. All 4 of our, what we call our core SKUs, are between that $40 and $60 range. So we brought you the Ascension tonight for that one, so that's about $45 you'll typically find. Exploration you typically find between 60 and 70, so that's the Calvados finished version. The Decade 3 that you drank tonight, that's typically about $100 that you typically find. Bootleg is the most expensive, so bootleg typically goes for $500 a bottle. The cost for that though is really driven by 3 things. 1, the whiskey for sure. 2, the packaging. Again, even just the journal that comes in, the bottle, etc. And 3, it's scarcity. So we only make between 4,000 and 5,000 bottles of that every year. It's very hard to find. So that one tends to be about $500. And then Rare Hair, that will come out, that 7-year will come out at about $70 or $80, and then the 15-year will be about $150.
That's all really reasonable.
It's really the goal. You heard Alex say something earlier that I'll repeat again. It's just the idea of approachability, but also whiskey for every occasion. Right? Bootleg is not an everyday pour. For some people it might be, and no judgments. But it's not intended to be, right? That's okay. That's meant to be something special. But it's also about having some really reasonable things that you can kind of come into and have something that you can bump into no matter what you're feeling.
Where can we purchase? Can we purchase everything outside of here? I go to Snyder's.
So I don't know Snyder. So what we'll do is we will make sure that everyone here has a link to our finder where you can find it. We've got a finder that's on our website that you can actually go. We'll send out a follow-up to everyone here that includes a link to that finder for where it is. And we are working to continue to expand the distribution here as well.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, we'll make sure that you've got that.
And of course, a lot are available here.
Yeah. This is the best place to buy right here.
Where? In DC?
No, right here.
Oh,
The mansion.
well, can I purchase it at the mansion?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
and, what, in 4 months? We'll be able to purchase it here?
Yes.
Okay, that's good, just want to verify that.
So I'm curious, now that he asked where can we get it at, with it being such a fresh brand, any specific targeted audiences, like East Coast, West Coast, like any sponsorships, like anyone besides Bob Dylan that you could, do that piece with? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're working through that right now. What I'll say is this. I think the easiest answer to that question is Bob Dylan fans and music fans and all that. And that is always going to be a core part of this brand, and always going to be an important thing for us.
Okay.
What I'd say from the target, the way that I answer that question though, that's bigger than this, is I would think about what Bob's story represents and the types of stories. There's a story that actually is very much a genesis of this brand. Did anyone of you guys see the movie, A Complete Unknown, with Timothée Chalamet about a year ago? The pivot point of that movie was about Bob deciding to stop playing acoustic and folk music and start to play electric guitar. And that's the tension in the movie. If you've seen the movie, and if you haven't seen the movie, I kind of accidentally just spoiled it for you, but it was 60 years ago, so maybe you already heard the story. And there's a story about this, of when Bob decided that he wanted to play electric guitar. And by the way, play electric guitar wasn't just like futzing around with an electric guitar. Like a Rolling Stone was one of his first electric guitar songs. So let's just all agree that that's some pretty good stuff that he did. And he got booed in the first times that he played electric. And his fans hated it. They tried to boo him off the stage at a show in Manchester over in England. They literally booed him so loud. He turned around to his band and they thought he was about to turn back around and start to play folk. Instead, he turned around, he looked at his band and said, no, let's play it fucking loud.
Yeah.
And that story, first of all, badass story. But second of all, that story, there's something really cool about the ethos of that person and how that person is. And that to me is the way that I think about the targeting, is how do we find those people that are sort of looking for that, I am who I am, I know what I want to do, I have something to offer for the world. I'm not going to let someone else tell me who it is. I'm going to be who that kind of person is. And to me, that's bigger than just like a specific demographic audience. It's a way of thinking. And I think that story is very much at the core of who the brand is and very much at the core of the stories that we're going to tell very much. We've always loved that story, not just because it's a cool story, but it's very much an awesome way to think and way to live your life. And I think we should all learn from very much that way.
What I'd like to do is to have the four of you stand so that our photographers can get a picture of you and whatever questions they might have afterwards, but I'd like for the newspapers to be able to get the photographs. So, photographers, if you can take these photographs.
Yes, good.
Get blinded by the light.
Okay, well, any more questions?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still, the last issuance of this particular bourbon, how much was that? You know, y'all stopped it.
Yeah, so the question was the pricing for the rare here. That would be about $70 to $80.
You would have turned around, they probably would have.
And again, when will it be on sale here?
Hopefully January.
January?
So it's produced, it's ready to go. We're going to plug it out. Yeah, and we're going to put the bottle of bootleg over at the bar. Please enjoy a taste of it. We just didn't want to overwhelm you if you didn't want it, but it's yours. Please enjoy.
Have you thought about any pre-sales or, you know, especially with the holidays coming up? I mean, really, talking about I'll contact Lady Raymond and her.
Michael Jackson.